Welcome to chess, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so I'm gonna have to apologize because I need to actually remake this video because the original video that I made, um, I thought it was cool, but the audio was really horribly messed up. For some reason, there was a lot of static. I recorded two videos today, so the first one was perfectly fine audio wise, and this next one I was informed that it sucked, so I watched it, and it does suck. So I appreciate the support, but I saw that there was 2 thumbs up on it. And so I thought things were going good. And then somebody told me, they were like, yeah, man, the audio's kind of messed up. I was like, oh, man. So that's something that's kind of hard to foresee. But what I did do was I did put it into the bloopers and outtakes folder, the playlist. So that way if somebody does want to watch it at some point, it's just kind of a way for me to kind of let people know that I'm not perfect, that mistakes do happen. I'm a human being just like everybody else. So welcome to my chess channel. For those of you that are coming from the Philippines, Kamusta, Miraming Salamat, Kaibagan, Akim Magat Kaibagan. Appreciate you guys coming through and showing me some support. As always, put this here. As always, for any of those that haven't subscribed yet, please do. Appreciate it very much. Throw me some comments and some feedback. Now I have been on a little bit of a hiatus. I had a couple stuff that came up family wise, and I am moving. So that's why I have been MIA for a little while. But I'm slowly starting to get back into things. And Wesley So is playing on the 6th of February in the third tournament that they have for the Champions Chess Tour. So I'll definitely be making sure that I cover that. But yeah, if you guys are ready, we can go ahead and take a look at this game. And as I told you guys before, my chess puzzles are separated now into a different thing. And I definitely won't be doing this much talking in the future at the beginning of my videos. But every now and then you kind of have to get people informed, because there are, a lot of people that do follow everything I post. So I want to make sure that they are informed and they have all the information that they need. But without any further ado, let's go ahead and take a look and see what we have for this game here. All right, so we have e4, c5. Go ahead and run through these moves. This is a very super typical, Sicilian Najdorf. So we have knight to f3. We have d6. We have d4. So this is the open Sicilian. And we have pawn takes d4, knight takes d4, knight to f6, knight to c3, and we have a6. This is going to be, with the exception of the actual Najdorf, the series of moves that you did see from white and black is going to be the most typical way that each side plays the game. You're usually going to see e4, c5, knight to f3, d6 is going to be coming. And that's definitely not the only way to play, but it's going to be the most heavily played. So we have f3. Now f3 is kind of a sideline. It's definitely like kind of in the middle of the pack. It's probably about 6th or 7th down. Now, of course, there's about 20 different moves that white has played in this position because the Najdorf has been played, so heavily. F3, like I said, is about 6 or 7 down on the list. So it's not a severe sideline, but it's not the most heavily played move. And so we see e5, knocking the knight back somewhere. So we got knight to b3. We got bishop to e6. We got bishop to e3. Now, something I want you guys to be paying attention to. For all of you guys that either that play the Sicilian from the white side or the black side, you'll know that a lot of the times when you do either play e6 or e5, either directly or, with double moves, it does weaken the d6 pawn quite a bit. And that's one of the things that is really thematic in the Sicilian defense, and not just the Najdorf, but just in general. A lot of the people that do play the Sicilian on the black side, they are aware that there is a lot of care that has to be employed when you're playing the Sicilian, because this does become a very juicy point, or as Hikaru Nakamura will say, that's a juicer anyway. It's a very soft point in black's position. And one of the things that white is doing, white is trying to control this square. They want to make it impossible to push this pawn. So bishop to e6 is trying to discourage bishop from c4, bishop to c4 to be played. And a lot of times you'll see a queen to c7 because it's trying to discourage the bishop to c4 movement too. because this diagonal is just super beautiful for white. So just running through it some more. We have bishop to e7, we got queen to d2, we got h5, we have knight to d5, knight takes d5, pawn takes d5. We have bishop to f5, got bishop to e2, we have a5, and we have a4. So, you know, of course, we don't want to see any a4s coming from black because we don't want the knight to have to, you know, get dislodged, because you're going to have to put it like in a really horrible square like this. And so you don't want to undevelop your piece. So a4 just stops that altogether. And then we have castles by black. And this is actually the novelty of the game. Castles has never been seen before in this specific position. We've seen knight to d7 before. That's going to be, that was played twice. And then we were seeing like castles by white and queen to c7. So we have not seen castle. I always think it's interesting when you see, you know, castles is the novelty move, because it's just such a natural move. But anyway, so we have castles for white. We have knight to d7. We have f4. We have pawn takes f4. Bishop takes f4. We have rook to c8. We have c3. And as you guys are probably familiar with, and when you see my videos and stuff, a lot of times you'll see c3 when there's a knight on c6, because it just restricts, you know, black's ability to, you know, put a knight on either of these two squares. Which sometimes it can lead to some pretty nice attacks if, you know, you can get your knights in here. So c3 is a very good move to try to just take away some squares from the black side here. So we see knight to f6. We got bishop back to e3. You have bishop to e4, bishop to d4, and we see knight takes d5. And it might kind of seem like, you know, white has just given away a pawn for nothing. But it's not quite a pawn sacrifice all the way. But it is pretty even for both sides. So we see bishop to f3. Now to back up here, for some of you guys that are wondering, it just kind of looks like this is this is a pawn. And actually it is. You can actually take, I'm not sure why Giri didn't want to take that pawn. He's not really risking anything. I mean, the worst that black can do is really just hit g6, but you know, if they hit g6, they're weakening their king a little bit. So, you know, there's not really any particular reason, you know, why you can't play g6, or why you can't, you know, take on h5. So it was perfectly logical. But for some reason, Giri, I guess he saw something else and he didn't want to do it. So we see bishop to g5, queen to e2. And so we see bishop takes f3, queen takes f3, and we see knight to f6. And so after queen to f5, attacking the undefended bishop on g5, on g5, we see knight to g4, and then we see queen takes a5. Something I want you guys to notice is, you know, we have an equal distribution of pawns for white and for black. But if you notice, you know, white's pawn structure is a lot better than black's is. And so, you know, they have a healthy connected, you know, they have some healthy connected pawns here on the queen side, and they also have, you know, some nice connected pawns on the king side here. And, you know, not that it's losing for black, but black does have a little bit of an issue with their pawn structure. So they have, you know, that they have an isolated pawn on the B file and the D file. And this is probably something that, you know, Giri actually did see. And so, you know, instead of just taking this pawn here, which wasn't going to be as bad, he probably just went ahead and said, hey, let me isolate this pawn here on the queen side. So we see rook to e8. And after queen takes d8, bishop takes d8, we see rook f to e1. We see knight to e5. We see knight to d2. We have rook to e6, rook e to d1. We have king to f8. We have b4, knight to c6, trying to tickle the bishop there. And so we just retreat the bishop back to f2, and we see knight back to e5. Now, it looks like there's some pretty clear threats for black here. But if you want to go ahead and stop the video and see what you can guess for Giri for white, see if you can guess what he actually plays here. It's a pretty random looking move to some, I think. I mean, when I first saw it, I was able to get the gist of it, but it looks kind of confusing to me at first. But like I said, if you want to go ahead and stop the video, see if you can see what Anish Giri played here. It's a pretty nice little idea, and it comes into play a little bit later on into the game. So, all right, cool. So for those of you that actually said rook d to c1, You weren't wrong. This was actually a really good play. It was also good to just go back with the bishop to d4, but it could have possibly become a repetition. So rook d to c1 was actually legitimate, but the move that was actually played in the game is a5. Now it might look kind of strange because you can just snap the pawn off with the rook, and you actually can, but this highlights the fact that you have a majority on the queen side. So after rook takes on c3, you'll see b5, and as you can see, a6 is coming, and you're going to be able to trade off here, and you're going to be able to get a pass pawn out of this. And so, the first thing that black tries to do is they try to get rid of this bishop because this bishop is defending this square. And so you want to be able to push this pawn without any issues. And so we see bishop to d4. We have rook to d3. We have knight to c4. And this is kind of the first inaccuracy by Grandelius. And it is rook takes d4. It seems like a pretty clear idea. If it was followed up, then it would probably be a good situation. But it was after rook takes d4, you see bishop to f6. And as you can see, you've lined up these rooks on this diagonal. And so that was the main problem. But like I said, the problem is if Grandelius would have actually followed this up with actually taking one of the rooks, then it would have made a lot more sense because you do see rook d to d1. And then you throw a little intermezzo in there of d5. And then after knight to b6, we see knight to e3. And it seems like we're attacking both rooks. But unfortunately, it allows knight to d7 with check. And then after king comes down to e7, we see knight takes f6. And the attack on the rook down here is just not quite in time because and it's actually in this position that that Grandelius actually resigns. And Anish Giri does win the game. So he does take the lead of the tournament. And so if we were to just kind of follow a couple different lines of play, one of those lines being if knight does take on d1, you would actually have problems after knight takes d5 with check. And then after king to d6, you would be taking on d1 with the rook. And as you can see, everything is equal except for white does have an extra. They just have a completely extra knight. And that's just one of the ways. I mean, another one of the ways is, let's say that the king does take here. Because you don't want to take with the rook because you're going to be having some pinning issues and stuff. So we would see rook to d3. After knight to c2, we'd see rook to a4. And then after something like rook to e1 with check, the king would come to f2. We'd see rook to e8, and we'd see rook to f3 with check. And the king would step over. We'd see rook to c3. And as you can see, the knight is getting pretty trapped. So you would have to do something like rook to e1. But then after a6, that's where, what I was talking about earlier comes into play. Because now you're going to be having to trade. These two rooks are just too strong for the rook and the knight. And so, like I said, you would see pawn takes, you'd see pawn takes, and then the rook would have to come to a8. And then after a7, this king doesn't really have any way to come over here because it is cut off by these rooks. And so, you're just going to have, not only is the knight in pre, you're going to be moving the rook over, and then after rook comes up, you're going to be forced to trade, give the rook up for the rook, and then you're going to have a queen and a rook, and that's bad. We don't want that. So that is the game, guys. I appreciate you guys stopping by. Like I said, I took a little bit of time off, but I am back now. So I'm going to start getting my videos rolling again. My guy Ronaldo, I have not forgotten about you, my guy. Salamat for the support. I just didn't really have a lot of time to do a lot of looking into specific games that you asked me for, but I do have it noted. I would definitely be taking a look at what I need to look at for you later on. But I appreciate everybody coming by. Hit me with a subscribe and a like, and give me some comments and let me know what you like. And hopefully this audio is a lot better and not like the last video. All right, I appreciate it, guys. See you.